We are in a world of pain when it comes to energy. Labor's renewables rollout, the regulator warns again today, is nowhere near where it needs to be when coal leaves the grid prior to 2040. Then there's the looming gas crisis, with one of the nation's larger gas plants already halving output, meaning there's a real prospect of blackouts this winter and the choice between heating homes or powering business, but not both. And all a self-inflicted mess. That's the great tragedy of it all. Joining me now to discuss this and more, former Prime Minister Tony Abbott. Well, Tony, we're a resource-rich country. We export coal, gas, uranium, of course, yet we're warned we won't be able to use it to heat our homes this winter. It'd be farcical if it wasn't so serious. Can you understand why people are angry when so much of this is self-imposed?
Look, I can, Peter, understand why people are angry. We have been running our electricity system not to produce affordable and reliable power, but to reduce emissions for the best part of a decade and a half. And frankly, it's now becoming a slow-motion train wreck. This idea that we should rush to get rid of gas, rush to get rid of coal, when the rest of the world is hungry for our gas, hungry for our coal, it is an act of economic self-harm. It's worth noting, Peter, that no other country, none anywhere on earth, is trying to establish 82% renewables within 6 years. None is trying to do this. So we are trying to lead the world as if we could save the world. Now, with about 1% of global emissions here, with India and China rapidly increasing their emissions, whatever we do, this is just a futile green gesture, and the sooner the public wake up to what's going on, the better for all of us.
I think Australians are starting to wake up, because now, you know, before it was tick a box on climate, do you care? Yes, I do, but there were no ramifications. I think now they're starting to feel the pain very obviously in their power bills. You know this debate well, going back to the carbon tax era. I think where the left profit is this is a really complex area, and they like to deliberately keep it complex. But also the idea that renewables are cheap. You know, wind is free, solar is free. Only it's not free if you want to use it for power, and that's where people are hurting. But on the face of it, it sounds pretty seductive.
Look, wind and solar are only cheap when the wind is blowing and the sun is shining. But we need power 24/7. So the more wind and solar you've got, the more you damage the economics of reliable baseload power. What we absolutely need to firm up wind and solar is more gas, and yet gas is exactly what the climate zealots won't let us have.
Talk to me about the nuclear policy from Peter Dutton, because, well, A, it's the right call. A lot of the OECD countries like Australia have nuclear in the mix. But it's also, I think, ideologically, in political strategy terms, I think it's the right call, because finally now, we've got a point of difference between Labor and Liberal, and for too long, the Libs have thought they can win or hold government by being just Labor light. I mean, we've got to fight now, haven't we?
And I think it's a phrase we've used before, Peter, Labor light, Liberals lose. Now, what Peter Dutton has done is created a contest. It's the first time there's been a serious contest about energy and climate over the last decade. And look, this idea that we can't do nuclear when at least 33 other countries do, it's ridiculous. This idea that nuclear is somehow unsafe when we've had a nuclear reactor at Lucas Heights within a stone's throw of backyards for 60 years, that's ridiculous. This idea that somehow we can't have nuclear on land when we're going to get it at sea, that's ridiculous. This idea that nuclear would take too long when, hell, we've got this Snowy 2.0, which is going to take more than a decade to bring to fruition, and where the costs have blown out from 2 billion to 12 billion plus. Again, all of the arguments used against nuclear don't stand up. In the end, it just becomes green prejudice that is stopping us from going down this path. It is the only way of getting to net zero and keeping the lights on, because it's the only proven form of zero emissions baseload power for a country like Australia.
I want to ask you about Ukraine, because I know you've been there recently. I've been on leave, of course. We were with a whole bunch of others over on the Western Front. You then went down to not Kyiv, where you've been before, the capital city, which is relatively safe, but you went into the battle zone in Ukraine. About the time that we heard comments from Nigel Farage in England saying that, you know, basically Ukraine's got to roll over and negotiate with Putin. Give me your reflections from your couple of days on the ground.
Look, the Ukrainians are defiant but somewhat despondent because they haven't been given in a timely fashion the kind of help they need to win. They've been given enough not to lose, but they haven't been given enough to win. I find the sorts of comments that we've heard from Nigel Farage pretty incomprehensible. This idea that somehow NATO has goaded the Russians into attacking Ukraine, it's an utter nonsense. NATO expanded because all of the vulnerable countries of Eastern Europe, the Polands, the Hungaries, the Baltic states, and more recently Sweden and Finland, justifiably fear a Russia which has not been purged of militarism and imperialism. So that's the first point I make. The second point I want to make is that Australia has been, frankly, embarrassingly dithering in, first of all, its relatively puny assistance to Ukraine. We've got hundreds of Bushmaster armoured vehicles, hundreds of Hawkeye armoured vehicles that we can and should give to Ukraine. But the weakest of all is the fact that 70 countries have sent their ambassadors back to Kyiv. Our ambassador is still cowering in Warsaw. How can you have an ambassador to Ukraine cowering in Warsaw? Now, I don't blame the ambassador, but I do blame the government. It's just incomprehensible that somehow it's not too dangerous for other countries' ambassadors to be there, but it's too dangerous for us. I mean, what are we, a nation of wimps? Hardly.
There's an old Prime Minister's club. I'm sure the current Prime Minister might take a call from you on this issue and perhaps fix it, or be careful, he might send you to Kyiv. Tony Abbott, thanks for your time.
Thanks.